Lab Muffin is 10 years old. The concept, not me, this isn't some sort of weird leap year thing. In case you didn't know, Lab Muffin started as a blog before it expanded into this YouTube channel in 2017. The 10-year anniversary was in December. My very first blog post was on the 5th of December 2011, and my first real blog post was on the 9th of December, and that was called Chemical versus Natural, which was talking about all the myths around natural beauty products, which was like the earlier fetus version of clean beauty. Now Lab Muffin is my full-time job, and I never thought it would ever come to this. It is pretty much my dream job, so thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting me and making this possible. I asked everyone to send in questions they had about Lab Muffin, so this video is going to be like a big overview of who I am, how I got here, what I've learned on the way, behind the scenes of Lab Muffin, sort of like how the sausages are made. In case you haven't already subscribed, do that, like the video, and click the notification bell so you get notified when there are new videos. Biggest changes within the science/skincare community. Everyone knows a lot more of the basics now, which I like to think is partly because of me. And because of that, I think people are a lot more interested in knowing the details and really understanding everything at a much deeper level. The really nice thing about this is that I can talk about much deeper topics that I never thought I'd be able to tackle. Things like the maths behind calculating whether or not you need indoor sunscreen, the mechanism behind how different sunscreens work, which is really incredible. 30,000 people watch me talk about electronic transitions between quantized energy levels, and that to me is absolutely mind-blowing. On the bad side, I think marketing myths have gotten a lot more complex and sophisticated, and so they've become a lot harder to debunk. And if you've heard of Brandolini's Law, which is also known as the BS asymmetry principle, you need to put in a lot more effort to debunk stuff than to put out garbage. Also, maybe we care a little bit too much about the details these days. Maybe we're getting bogged down in things that don't really make a huge difference at the end of the day. A lot of the time with skincare, there just isn't a clear-cut answer, and the best thing to do is really just look at reviews from people you trust and just try things for yourself rather than trying to logic it out from a scientific perspective. Over the 10 years, name the top 3 most infuriating myths you've heard. I think number 1 has to be sunscreen is causing more skin cancer than the sun, because this is just straight up dangerous misinformation. I live in Australia and I know a lot of people who have skin cancer now, and maybe they could have prevented that with sunscreen. There's also the whole beauty companies are just trying to kill you because they want to make more money thing that a lot of clean beauty tends to promote. This is one of the reasons I started my blog. It is basically just a big pharma conspiracy theory, but for beauty. My mum falls for this one a lot, and that's another reason I started my blog, because I was going down all these rabbit holes trying to convince my mum not to just throw out all of her shampoo. Fear is a really powerful emotion. It's really fundamental to the way that we humans evolved. And I think it's just so scummy when beauty brands try to exploit this and manipulate you and make you feel really scared to try to get a profit. There's also the whole idea that there's no science in cosmetics, and there is. For example, skincare is pretty much just applied medicinal chemistry. There are lots of reasons why the evidence doesn't look as rigorous as maybe it is or maybe it should be. And a lot of that is just because of the legalities around how skincare is regulated. This is the whole drug versus cosmetic thing that I've talked about before. There just isn't a lot of incentive for companies to actually run rigorous studies, even if that particular ingredient is really well supported by the evidence so far. And so this leads to a lot of lazy debunkings, things like saying collagen cannot possibly work because they just didn't bother doing a literature search. That whole zinc study where they looked at sunscreens, but they only looked at sunscreen technologies that are 30 years old. I think a lot of this comes from this idea that cosmetic science is female and frivolous, and so there can't possibly be any science in it. If you look at areas with lots of pseudoscience, but it's mostly male dominated, things like gym junkie bro science and cars and tech, you see that people are a lot more careful when they debunk things there. They take it a lot more seriously and they do a lot more background research. They don't just go in there and assume they know everything. And yeah, I think it does come down to the idea that cosmetics is a lot more frivolous and fluffy, and there's just zero science there, even though we have these multinational companies that hire lots and lots of scientists in cosmetics. Negativity and hate. Most people are really supportive. Skincare creators are generally really nice. I do tend to get more hate when I'm doing myth-busting stuff, because sometimes I am talking about people's deep-seated beliefs. It can affect people's businesses. So It's understandable that people often have a pretty bad initial reaction. Sometimes it's even just people who are big fans of the brand. Maybe they've tried a whole bunch of face creams and this is the one face cream that works, but the brand happens to have a whole bunch of dodgy marketing. Sometimes it's from people who did sponsored posts for a product I criticized. There was the propaganda video. That was when I got cited as a propaganda source twice in a peer-reviewed article, and he sometimes comments on my blog as well. It's very strange. With misrepresentation, it happens a lot, and I think it's pretty unavoidable. A lot of the time, my stances are pretty complex, and it's pretty easy to misrepresent them if they get summarized. I'm pretty sure I've misrepresented my own beliefs. I've had a science brand try to debunk my fatty acids and oils video, and they just used a whole bunch of points that I addressed in the video. In terms of dealing with it, it depends on the exact situation. If it's a common misconception, then I try to address it publicly, or maybe if they have a really large reach. Sometimes I reach out to them privately and try to sort it out that way, and sometimes I think it's best to just ignore it and go out and touch some grass. Do people in real life raise an eyebrow when they find out I'm a skincare content creator? Yes. I think it's kind of 50-50. Some scientists, especially those in academia, think it's really silly because of that whole there's no science in cosmetics thing. But a lot of people are really supportive, including a lot of my male scientist colleagues who think it's pretty cool. My boss at my tutoring college, who never uses social media, has been just so supportive. He's always helping me out with any physics questions I have. He lent me the thermal camera that I've been using. How do you decide which companies to work with? With my sponsorship selection process, the ultimate test is, will people who can't buy this product at all, maybe they live in Antarctica, will they get something useful or interesting out of this piece of content? So obviously it has to be based on interesting science, it has to be scientifically accurate. And I have to actually like the product. Most of the brands I work with are because I've used their products before and I tried it and liked it and posted about it, and that's why they reached out to me for a sponsorship. If I haven't tried the product before and I think I might like it, they have to send it to me and I try it before I sign any contracts. There are sponsorships that have fallen through because even though the product was perfectly good, I just didn't like it. And that's because I think even if the science is interesting and I explain it, at the end of the day, people are going to ask me, do I recommend this product? Did I like the product? And I want to be able to say yes. There's been one exception where I didn't like the product, but they wanted me to make purely educational content, and that was Pantene, and that's just because I'm allergic to the preservatives they use, so I can't actually use their product. Have you ever faced a situation where sponsors weren't happy with my scientific evaluation of the product? It's actually incredibly rare that I get any pushback on the facts that I talk about in a sponsored piece of content. Part of it is that I'm really choosy with my sponsorships, and the brief is actually in the contract so you can see it before you sign it. Generally, this is like in Appendix A, and if there's anything in that I'm not comfortable with, if it's not scientifically accurate, if there's not enough evidence for it, then I'll usually ask for it to be taken out of the contract if it's like a small thing. If there's way too much in there that I disagree with, then I just don't sign the contract. 99% of the time, the edits that I have to make aren't actually factual. Most of the time, I get no edits. So of the edits I've recently had to make, I've pronounced something wrong. I got the price wrong. Sometimes they want a particular shot in the content, so maybe I didn't show applying the product, or maybe the label got a bit blurry. A couple of times they've changed the packaging since I shot it and they wanted me to reshoot that content. Sometimes they want me to reword things for legal reasons or include disclaimers. For example, with sunscreens in Australia, you have to have a particular disclaimer. I think once they didn't want me to mention a competitor because they didn't want to risk getting sued. There is one piece of feedback that I absolutely hate that I've gotten a lot less pushback on, and that's changing the language of the disclosure. A few years back, I used to always get feedback to change sponsored to partner or collab, but these days it's gotten a lot less. It's also a lot easier to argue against it now because Australia now has clear legal guidelines and I can point at them and they know they can't negotiate with that. Brands getting upset, blacklisting me, giving me legal threats. So after I criticize a brand, usually it's 50-50 whether they respond well or badly. Some brands are really nice about it. They thank me, they tell me they want to do better, and I'm sure sometimes it is just lip service and we should hold brands accountable for making these changes, but it definitely looks better from a PR perspective. It's much better than the alternative where they respond really badly. I've been blacklisted a few times from different brands and different PR companies. One brand I criticized contacted my management and reminded them about their sponsorships with their other creators, which I thought was a bit much. How do you go about researching a new topic? This really depends on the topic, and my process, as always, is a little bit chaotic. So let's say I'm trying to talk about a new publication. My first step is to make sure I really understand the background. These days it's a bit easier because I've done so much background reading for everything else already. I would read through the paper really closely, sentence by sentence, and look up anything I don't understand. Usually this is by looking through textbooks. You do have to be a bit careful with textbooks because there's sometimes a bit of inaccurate stuff. They're not really peer reviewed, so you do have to check against other sources, check against your existing knowledge, and check what experts think. Usually in this process, there are a lot of detours. It is rarely straightforward where I can just read a paper from start to end. It can take about 6 hours to read through, say, a 3-page paper. I think a key part for working out the correct direction for a topic is just knowing who the right experts are. For example, whether mineral sunscreens absorb or reflect UV. If you're a dermatologist, it doesn't actually matter to you which one it is as long as the sunscreen works. A physical chemist would have to know because firstly, they would use different machines to measure the UV protection if it reflected or if it absorbed. And secondly, it has to do with the microscopic structure of that chemical. If you're trying to work out if sunscreens cause or prevent skin cancer, then dermatologists, toxicologists, and regulators would be really relevant, but a physical chemist or a coral scientist wouldn't be relevant. So I think it's really important to work out whose opinion to give more weight to. Which video took the longest? There are videos that have been sitting on the back burner for months because they just won't quite come together. And I don't want to say the topics because I don't want to give people false hope. A lot of these topics are things that people have suggested to me. So don't feel like every time you give me a recommendation for a topic, it just goes into the ether. I write them all down and someday I hope to cover them all, but yeah, I am one person and unfortunately things take a lot of time. Sometimes it isn't even the volume of research that's tricky, sometimes it's collaboration. Basically, every time I do a collaboration, I have to start a whole new process and it takes ages trying to work out how to edit people in without misrepresenting them and still making the video flow together really nicely. Out of the videos I've done so far, probably the longest ones have been the clean beauty one, which had Dr. Fred. Editing his stuff down was pretty tricky. It took me months to work out how to make it sit together, but I'm really happy with the final product and he was happy with it too. Another video that took ages was the alcohol video, which had Kind of Steven, who I'm sure a lot of you know. That one took ages because we were trying to research together while coordinating through a Google document between Canada and Australia. So that was just sort of like a logistical thing, and also we were sitting on it for ages trying to work out what the best way to tell that story was as well. One of the videos where the research actually took a really long time was the coral reef video on reef safe sunscreens, and that was because when I made it there wasn't that much published about it. So I had a really difficult time trying to work out what the general scientific consensus was. So I had to dig through mailing list archives, through emails between coral scientists. These days it's a lot easier because there have been new review studies that have been published which confirm what I worked out. But yeah, having to work out what was happening in a topic that isn't really entirely my field was really tricky. The skincare oils and free fatty acids video also took ages because I had to skim through hundreds of papers. No one had really researched this topic directly, so I had to put it all together through studies that accidentally gave me the info I needed. The octocrylene propaganda video was also quite difficult because I was in a weird headspace at the time. I had a lot going on in my life, and you can sort of tell I got kind of ambitious about it. I was trying to make that whole Taylor Swift meme sequence. And yeah, whenever I get a really good idea and I really want to make it work, I generally don't have the skills to make it work, so that one required a lot of outside help. So I got a lot of questions about my educational background. In high school, I was actually more interested in arts. I took drama, history, 4-unit English, 4-unit maths, and chemistry. I was good at physics and bio, but I wasn't as interested in them, and I just really liked chemistry. I really liked how chemistry explained a lot of things that I saw in everyday life, because everything could just be linked back to the fundamentals of how molecules interact with each other. Things like why you get condensation on the outside of a cold drink, why raindrops merge on a window, why you get bubbles from detergent, why if you have dry pencil lead it makes your hand dirty, whereas like if you have dry pen ink it doesn't. How like different painkillers worked. So I went to a really academic high school and we had these lunchtime chemistry classes and my friend went to it, so I tagged along. It was sort of like more of a social event for me. Here's something that I think might be a bit unexpected. I don't think I started off naturally good at chemistry, but because I went to all these extra lunchtime classes, mostly to hang out with my friends, I got a lot of practice and then I got good at chemistry. I think that's actually why I'm good at teaching chemistry, because I have an insight into what it's like to suck at chemistry. In Australia, there's a system where you get a mark at the end of high school and then different uni courses have different cutoff marks, and so there's this stupid idea of not wasting your marks. So a lot of people in my high school get pressured into doing medicine or law, and so I picked combined law at Sydney Uni. At the time, it had the highest entry marks, so I wasted less of my marks, and a lot of my friends were doing law. It seemed like a respectable job, and it's the top law school in the country. I combined law with science for two reasons. The main one was when I was 17, science sounded like something that would be a bit more of a useful degree than arts. Also, because I went to those lunchtime classes, I ended up being top 20 in the state for Chemistry Olympiad, and that meant you could actually skip first year chemistry. So basically, my approach was I picked subjects I was somewhat interested in and potentially had a career after it, and if I could get higher marks without as much effort, then even better. So my science courses were chemistry, psychology, maths, pharmacology, and physiology. So the idea was I could become a patent attorney or potentially go into drug design. I was really fascinated by how different substances could have like really different effects on your body. So different things could get you to stop sneezing or stop your headache or hallucinate or drop dead. My parents are nurses, so when I was a kid, I got a lot of random stuff given to me when I was sick. So after the first 3 years of undergrad, I paused law for a year to do honours in chemistry. I ended up dropping law because even though I love studying law, it turns out I hated working in a law firm. The project I was working on was where my law firm was representing a tobacco company, and I never really considered myself a super moral person. I assumed if I got paid enough, then I would be comfortable giving fair representation to any party because that's what all lawyers should be doing. But it just slowly ate away at me that I was working so hard, and the harder I was working, the more I was helping what to me seemed like the bad guys win. There's no judgment from me for people who do this kind of work. I have a lot of friends in law, and I think detachment is a really useful skill, but it just isn't the way I'm built. So because of that experience, I'm a big believer in trying out lots of different things. If you think you might be interested in something, then just try it out because you don't really know what it's like unless you immerse yourself in that experience. If you can't get practical hands-on experience, then try to talk to people who work in the fields that you might want to go into. So hopefully you get a better feel for what actually interests you and what you enjoy doing, and whether or not that field matches that. So I discovered that a lot of people become patent attorneys after getting a PhD, so doing a PhD seemed like a good way to keep both of those patent attorney / drug design paths open. My PhD was a continuation of my honours project, which was really interesting. It was on medicinal and supramolecular chemistry. I also made a lot of friends in my cohort, and a lot of us decided to continue our PhD, so that was a really nice group of people to be around. There was also the fact that the admin to change unis, let alone countries, was just a lot. I'm really bad with dealing with admin, and staying at Sydney Uni was just like filling in 2 pages. So that's the not very inspiring story of how I ended up doing a PhD. What made you decide to go the psychom route and not stay in academia? I've always really enjoyed teaching, so during my PhD I did a bit of lab teaching, and I also taught tutorials to undergrads. I also did a lot of tutoring before this, so my first tutoring job was at 14, and when I was a kid I actually remember inventing multiple choice tests for my friends to do so that they could join a club. Yeah, I was just a really annoying child. So there's just not that much teaching in academia. A lot of academia just revolves around research, but a lot of psychom is pretty much like teaching. So that's another reason why I started Lab Muffin. At the time, people told you that if you wanted to go into psychom, you should start a blog as like a portfolio, and it could really show that you were truly interested in psychom. So I think the main thing that got me out of thinking of academia as a long-term job was that there was a fire in my lab in 2012. It was the final year of my PhD, and I was in the lab where the fire was, and I pretty much just saw my life flash before my eyes. Our labs were organized so that all the organic chemists were on one level, and organic chemistry involves a lot of really flammable solvents. So you can basically imagine it was just a lab where on top of every lab desk there was just a bunch of petrol. In my mind, in that moment, I thought the whole building would just go up in flames. I could just see a wall of flames just like exploding towards me. It didn't. The fire was actually confined to a really small area, but that incident affected me a lot. I had PTSD for about 6 months. I had nightmares every single night. When I went back near that building, I got this really uncomfortable, like skin crawling feeling, and it made finishing my PhD really difficult. I didn't publish as many papers as I probably could have. I took a bit longer than I should have as well. That incident really highlighted that I love chemistry, but not enough to die because someone else screwed up. So after I graduated, I didn't really know what to do. I lived in Switzerland for half a year with my partner at the time. I got really depressed. I worked on my blog. I became a moderator on skincare addiction on Reddit. I started teaching at Matrix Education to earn some money on the side. This is a tutoring college that does usually classes of 15. They hire a lot of PhD students and they paid really well. And about 6 months later, they offered me a full-time position as a chemistry coordinator. So I was in charge of hiring teachers, teaching, and writing the teaching material. So I was writing the textbooks and inventing experiments. And so I sort of just fell into that role and I found that I absolutely loved it. I stayed there until I went full-time with Lab Muffin, and I still teach there a few hours a week. Where did the name Lab Muffin come from? This story is just not that exciting. So I knew I wanted to do a blog. I couldn't think of a name. And so I couldn't really start doing my blog for about 4 weeks. And I knew I just had to start. So I settled on Lab Muffin. I was sitting in a lab at the time when I set up my first Blogspot account. Muffin was the nickname from my partner at the time. I told myself I could just start and then change the name later, and I just never thought up a better name and I never got around to changing it. So the good thing about the phrase Lab Muffin is that it is like a brand new sentence, which means it's very search engine friendly. So back in 2012, if you typed in Lab Muffin into Google, I would be the first result. So if you're trying to pick an online handle and you want to be very easily searchable, I would definitely recommend something relatively unique and easy to spell. Lab Muffin worked really well for that. If you have a really distinctive name, then I would just go with your name. But that wasn't an option for me because there were literally 27 other Michelle Wongs back when I tried to sign up to Hotmail in 1997. How did your PhD/degree help you with your career, and what did you have to learn yourself? So my PhD project was on cyclic peptides. I was making them and then exploring their uses as drugs and supramolecular scaffolds. So that combined with my undergrad subjects gave me a really good background understanding of things like chemistry, pharmacology, physiology, medicinal chemistry. So from that, I was really used to looking at things like ligands and biochemical pathways, but I never really looked at anything like retinoids specifically. So I think more importantly, I developed a lot of other skills from my PhD training and from my previous job. During a typical PhD, you have to defend your ideas against people who are kind of trying to make you break. It's a bit toxic, some people cry, but you kind of get used to having to really critique your own ideas so that you can work out all the flaws before you go up on stage and have to publicly defend yourself. Writing the textbooks was also really good training because the audience was both chemistry PhDs and PhD students who were teaching it and the high school students. So you had to make it work for a lot of different people. When did you realize you could go full-time as a science communicator? So in 2017, I added banner ads to my blog, and that's when financially I started making more money than I was spending on Lab Muffin. And that's when it started looking like it could potentially be a part-time job. I was starting to get over $1,000 a month without a ton of effort. And I really wish I discovered this a lot earlier on and not 6 years in. So yeah, I guess my advice would be if there's a hobby that you love doing, see if you can make money out of it earlier on. In late 2017, I started my YouTube channel, and that's when I started to get a lot more sponsorship opportunities and the workload started to really ramp up. By late 2018, I was working on Lab Muffin on the train to and from work, and every weekend I pretty much had no life. I worked like 70 to 80 hours a week. I was basically in lockdown before lockdown was a thing. My accountant didn't actually believe how many hours I worked until I showed her my records. Every Sunday and Monday, which was my weekend, I'd literally get out of bed, stumble across the room to my chair, and then work straight from 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. I went out of my room for meals and for bathroom breaks, and that was it. I do not recommend this at all. I recommend trying to figure out a way to avoid this as early as you can. By the middle of 2019, I was making enough money from content creation that it could be a full-time job, and I was just about to burn out from working every single waking moment. I was constantly shallow breathing, I had a racing heart, my memory was getting really bad, and I was starting to get these like weird feelings in my legs, like I was getting little clots. So I resigned. I'm still not really good at that whole work-life balance thing, but it has gotten a lot better. So starting out and staying motivated, I think one of the things that really kept me going was having a nice community around me. There were a lot of other bloggers back in the day, and we all used to comment on each other's blogs, not in like an organized way, but just being really supportive. There wasn't like an algorithm back then, so we weren't really like boosting each other's posts like you might on Instagram. It was just like a really nice, supportive environment. There was also this this nail polish tag that was going around back in the day, and every week we would have Artsy Wednesday where we would have a different nail art theme. And I think these sorts of techniques still work in the age of social media, just having lots of support and working on nice collaborative projects. I also just felt like the content I was making just needed to be made. No one else was making this sort of thing back in the day, so things like scientific deep dives and myth busting in a way that's accurate but also people could really understand. But on the other hand, there was a lot of pseudoscience going around, and so I kind of felt like this sort of, I guess, duty to keep making my sort of content. How do you get started as a cosmetic chemist? Is a PhD necessary? Was it difficult? So cosmetic chemist is a qualification, and I did my diploma for this with the Institute of Personal Care Science. It's a very popular program that's widely recognized in the industry. You definitely don't need a PhD to do it. I think you need the equivalent of a high school certificate. It is definitely harder to understand what's going on without some sort of science background, and you probably won't get as deep an understanding out of it, but it is definitely doable. And if you're interested, I would highly recommend it. What makes you happiest about doing YouTube and Lab Muffin? I'm just a bit of a massive nerd. I love understanding stuff at a really deep level and then explaining it to other people. I also really love the whole creative process of creating content, whether it's presentations or diagrams or textbooks or videos. What would you say is the most important part in translating science to the wider population? I think accuracy is obviously really important, but also empathy, just understanding what level of complexity people can handle, what analogies would work best for explaining something, and what feels satisfying, because what tends to work really well for myth busting is giving people a narrative that makes more sense than the myth. You have to help replace that with the truth. What did you study to improve the delivery of your blog posts and videos? I think this is one of those things where the best thing you can do is just practice a lot. Just make content, get feedback, and then incorporate that into your next piece of content. I think teaching is also really helpful because it's like delivering content and getting that real-time feedback. And this doesn't have to be formal teaching. You could just try explaining the topic you're trying to make content about to your friends or to your family. What are the pros and cons of writing versus videos? So I started making videos because I felt a bit constrained by blog posts. Some things are just really hard to show. You really sort of need an animation or something moving. Videos do take a lot longer though. Minus the research, a blog post would take about 3 hours, whereas a video would take 20 hours. Difficulties with using social media. I think the most annoying thing about social media is that you have to make the algorithm happy to get any sort of reach. Your posts don't get shown to your audience unless you tick off a whole bunch of boxes which change all the time. And that might not be the best thing for that particular piece of content. Maybe you need to have a static post with lots of words, but the algorithm wants you to make videos. Social media is also pretty intrusive. It's designed to make you want to check it all the time. And so if that's part of your work, then your work-life balance is a bit messed up. It's particularly bad because I'm in Australia, and so the peak times for social media are weird hours for me, things like 2 a.m. On the other hand, I do kind of like that the algorithm changes all the time because I like a challenge. I have a short attention span, and so I like making lots of diverse content. What are the best and worst parts of your job? I think the best thing is that I'm quite a creative person, and so my job is just my entire creative outlet. If you get bored of doing the same thing all the time, then this job is fantastic. The worst thing is that the harder you work, the more you're rewarded, and so that is really bad for work-life balance. Also, because it's like an internet job, it constantly feels really insecure, like the algorithm might screw me over at any moment and I would no longer have a job. I don't think this is unique to making content or being a science communicator. I've heard similar things from a lot of people who own their own businesses. And there are also content creators and science communicators who are doing it as part of a full-time salaried job, and so they won't have the same issues. One of the things that really helped me with time management is an app called Toggl. I use it to record how much time it took me to do particular things, and so that way I can better estimate how long it's going to take me to do similar things in the future. It's really good for not overcommitting yourself. Microphone, software, camera, lights. I'm going to take you on a little behind the scenes tour. Alright, so here is my filming setup. This is my blue microphone. It's a Yeti X, which was gifted. That is running into a laptop on my left. In front of me, I have my old S8, which is what I film on. It is currently attached to an ice pack because it's really hot today and it kept overheating. That's connected to a teleprompter. You can see my old phone there as well, reflecting into that. This teleprompter has been really good. I've only had it for a few months and it's made my video making so much quicker. Because of the teleprompter, it means I can't actually touch my phone. So my phone is attached to my tablet. So this is connected with Samsung Flow, and so I can control the phone through this tablet. This is my lighting situation. I have a softbox, and behind that I have I don't know, this like LED array. That LED array lights up my background, and that's also why sometimes my face looks lighter than the rest of my body, because the light from that gets blocked off by the softbox. I'm sure you've seen my background a million times, and the reason there's so much clutter around here is actually I tried to have a really nice empty studio, but it turns out having lots of stuff around is really good for audio quality. I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but I have a little box here that's just full of spatulas. What platform is most lucrative for you? Is blogging truly dead? So this might be a bit surprising, but my ad income is actually much better from my blog than YouTube, even though I spend so much more time on YouTube. There are lots of blogs that are doing way better than me as well, especially food blogs. I do think it's a little bit harder to get established as a blog these days because Google does rank you higher if you've got an older website. So if you are planning to start a blog, then I would recommend doing it alongside social media because discoverability is a lot better on social media. In terms of sponsorship, I get the most money from Instagram because I can produce a lot more sponsored Instagram content than I can with YouTube videos. YouTube videos take so long to make. Is there a point where skincare can become obsessive or unhealthy? Definitely. I think a lot of people overthink skincare. It's easy to just take the scientific evidence too seriously. In skincare, a lot of it is just not that clear cut. The evidence is really weak, and I feel like a lot of myths come from just overthinking that evidence. Whenever you see a strict rule for anything, usually that's pretty suspect because there aren't that many studies out there on non-medical skincare. In science, you generally need lots of replicated studies to be sure about things, and that just doesn't really exist in skincare. I think a lot of the time, getting obsessive about skincare is more of a symptom, and it's not skincare causing the obsession. A lot of people who come to skincare come there because of self-esteem issues, and skincare just becomes an outlet. What have you believed in the past that turned out to be myths? Pretty much every older myth I've debunked, I've probably believed. For example, sunscreen scattering and reflecting UV. This doesn't happen as much anymore because over the years I've become a lot more cynical, and so now if there's any new claims, I just start off not believing it by default. So I got a lot of questions about my future plans, and I do have some ideas for things that I really want to branch into, but I don't want to say too much because again, I don't like mentioning things that I'm working on because I have so many ideas that I just don't take through to completion. I do think I managed to do a decent amount of stuff, but there is only one of me, and so it's really hard to get everything I want done. I do not have plans for a skincare line. Maybe in the future I could see myself collaborating with someone, but I don't think I can start my own line because I would just end up spending all day doing stuff that I don't like. In other words, just doing admin. Hopefully this video was interesting and gave you an insight into how Lab Muffin works. It would be really sad if I released this video and then quit in a month, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully there will be a 15-year video as well. Thank you so much to everyone who's been supporting me and allowing this to become my full-time job, especially if you've been following since back with the blog days, back when I used to do nail art. I think it's really cool that we've built up this nerd community over the last decade, and hopefully it keeps going.